If you're working towards your NICET certification, or if you're just starting out in the fire alarm industry, test and inspection is going to be one of the most important topics that we're going to cover today. A lot of techs think that test and inspection is just checking boxes, but this is how you can actually tell if your system is going to pass or fail. This is where inspectors catch mistakes and where NICET actually pull its exam questions from real field-world experiences. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how you properly test and inspect the fire alarm system, what NFPA 72 is actually looking for, what inspectors require in the field, and how this information shows up on your NICET Level 1 exam. And this is field accurate, code driven, and based on how systems actually perform in the field. But before we get started, if you're dead serious about getting your NICET certification, check out the fire alarm resources in the link in the description. Now let's get straight to the video. The very first thing NICET wants you to understand is the difference between inspection and testing. These two terms are not interchangeable. Inspection is visual and testing is looking for the functionality of the fire alarm system. Inspection answers questions like, is this device installed correctly? While testing will usually ask a question, does this device function as it's supposed to? During an inspection, you're not looking to activate any devices. You're taking a visual look to see if the device placements are correct, you have any dust or dirt inside the smokes, if anything that look out of order, a horn strobe may be broke, batteries may be 7 years out of date, whatever your visual inspection is, that's what you need to look to determine what is wrong with the fire alarm system. And during the test, you're activating these fire alarm devices for functionality, especially if you have a smoke detector in the elevator lobby. You want to know if that relay will activate so that way the elevator can recall as it's supposed to. This matters when you're testing a fire alarm system, and it absolutely matters on a NICET Level 1 exam. Now, common exam trap that asks you something like, does a visual confirmation prove the operation of a strobe? The answer is no. Only testing can prove the operation of any type of fire alarm device. So understand, NFPA 72 separates testing and inspection on purpose, not to confuse you, but to make sure you understand the differences between the two. So now let's talk about what inspectors look for when you're testing a fire alarm system. So during an inspection, they're not looking to see you actually pull the fire alarm or blow smoke into the smoke detector. They're actually checking for the functionality of the fire alarm system. They're observing how the detectors are placed. They're observing if the pull stations and horn strobes are at the right height, especially if it's in a corridor. Do you have the proper spacing for each one of these devices? So the inspector is looking at everything overall within a nutshell when you're testing the fire alarm system. They're definitely making sure that the smoke detectors are not painted, clogged out, dust or dirt or anything on it. They're making sure you have remote LEDs if your duct detectors are too high in the ceiling or they are above the ceiling grid and you don't know they're even up there. You need some type of remote LED to let us know that you have something up in the ceiling that we can test, or there's something up in the ceiling that's giving us protection in that either that plenum ceiling or on the ductwork. They're making sure you label your fire alarm correctly. If you have a remote annunciator, it should be labeled fire alarm remote annunciator. And usually if that remote annunciator is in the lobby or the front of the building or the first point of entry for the fire department, you have to tell them where the fuse disconnect is located as well. However, if you have the fire alarm panel, you have to let it know this is a fire alarm control panel, same as a booster panel, fire alarm booster panel. You have to label your fire alarm devices. You also have to label your fire alarm panel so that way we know what things are. Plus, it's easier for troubleshooting, especially if you are very neat when it comes to actually installing your fire alarm system. If you label your wires correctly, you know how quickly I could be in and out of a building troubleshooting. You also want to pay attention to the labels and descriptors. So now if you're testing your device that's on the 3rd floor and it comes up 2nd floor, or the device label is absolutely wrong, you definitely want to mark that down so that way the programmer could come out there and make those label changes. You always want to make sure you have the exact message, the exact description, or the exact location for whatever device that's installed on a fire alarm system. So now if you test everything, you now have to prepare your report. Now your report is part of the process. This is not something you do at home. This is something you actually do on site. You mark down everything that's wrong with the fire alarm system, whether it is devices that's not working, devices out of order, if there's abandoned wires or abandoned devices, whatever it is, you need to write that down on the inspection report so that way the client can understand and know what is wrong with their system. You could actually give that back to the office, your company, so that way they could devise a plan plan to fix this. This could be additional revenue, or this could be part of the package that you have included with your client. However you have that deal worked out, it is your job to make sure that that system is 100% free of all troubles or anything that could actually harm or damage the fire alarm system. As we look at the fire alarm business blueprint, we have 4 out of the 9 modules completed, but you can see here, this is a very robust, a very detailed program. This is something that you're not going to be able to fly by through in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, this is going to take you a lot of time. There's a lot of information in here for you to know. This is more of a mindset shift versus structural training and things of that nature, because it's going to give you all the tools you need to start your business, to get your fire alarm license, to get insurance, to market your business, to become a personal brand, fix your credit if you already have good credit or bad credit, whatever. It's going to get you a business credit. It's going to give you vendor credit up to $100,000 and more. So whatever you need to actually fully function as a fire alarm company, everything is inside here, the Fire Alarm Business Blueprint. So now let's talk about testing. Testing is actually looking for the actual functionality of the fire alarm system. When you activate a pull station, what's supposed to happen? Am I supposed to release the doors? So I need to see door holders release. I need to see the doors close. If I'm activating duct detectors or area smoke detectors other than an elevator lobby, I need to be shutting down the fans. If I'm doing an elevator lobby, in addition to shutting down the fans, I need to also be dropping the elevators and some other functions behind that as well. So you need to verify all of these functions, especially if you have a purge system with stair pressurization, or if you have a purge system that has, monitoring your dampers open and close or partially closed, whatever the case may be, you need to verify all of these points and all of these functions on a fire alarm system. Now, there's some things the inspector look for, or some things you should also be looking for when you testing a fire alarm system or any device on a fire alarm system for that matter. When you first test, let's say, a pull station, you want to make sure that message is actually correct on the system. You want to make sure the trouble bells sound. You want to make sure the horns and strobes activate. You want to know all of the functions that actually happen on a fire alarm system, and you want to verify that each one of these functions actually happen. You want to make sure that the batteries can hold the system or sustain the system if there's no AC present. Whatever your testing procedures are, that is your job to make sure that this system will stay reliable in a time that it needs to be reliable, especially in an emergency. So whatever signals you have to send, alarm, supervisory, trouble, telephone line 1 and 2, your communicator line, data loss, whatever signal that you have to send for whatever's connected to the fire alarm system needs to be verified and sent to the central station, and also verify that that signal actually goes to the central station. And if you have CO detectors, you want to make sure that the central station is actually dispatching the fire department on a CO signal. It may not sound the horns and strobes, it may just be a supervisory signal, and it may just sound some sounder bases, but you want to make sure still that the fire department will show up if a CO event occurs. So now here's the first ever Spark Series Field Notes Pocket Edition book. This is for the technician who got stuck on a Friday afternoon trying to get home, but he got that call and he's in front of the panel, don't know what to do. This book will help you get unstuck. Now let's talk about some reasons why your fire alarm system may fail inspection. You may have a pull station that has a broken box. It may be a glass rod that needs to be replaced. Something as simple as a glass rod, yes, you can actually write that down. It doesn't fail the system, but it's like there's a problem that we have to come back and then put a glass rod in this fire alarm pull station. You want to make sure that your horns and strobes are mounted correctly, that the candelas is actually set right. You want to make sure that the lens is not broke. You want to make sure that the cover is not broke. You want to verify that there's not a bunch of dust inside of the fire alarm control panel. You want to verify that the batteries are up to date within 5 years. If not, they need to be replaced or taken out. Now, specific to an Edwards system, you may get a maintenance fault. And at the time you get a maintenance fault, that means that detector is 80% dirty. There's nothing you can do about it. That device needs to be replaced, and it's going to put a monitoring trouble on your system. Now, at that point, if anything happened in that particular area, that device will not go into alarm. So it's your job to know what is the percentage for all of the smokes that is installed on your system. You can do a report for less than 20 and also less than 80, so that way you can figure out what smokes need to be cleaned and what smokes need to be replaced. Now, the last and final crucial piece to an inspection or test, in any test and inspection, is your documentation. You need to make sure the paperwork is accurate. Document anything that did not work and everything that did work. You need to know the amount of devices you actually had installed on the system. If you don't, if you guys installed the system, you should be able to get inside of the program to get that report, or have the office or the programmer send you a report of whatever's on the loop card, loop controller, whatever system you're working on. You should know what is connected to it, so that way you can check off smoke detector first floor, smoke detector second floor, smoke detector third floor. And some companies use building reports where you could actually put serial numbers and scan it to make sure you actually test each and every device. Now, when it comes to NICET, they're really testing to see if you understand the difference between testing and inspection, not if you can memorize everything inside of the code book. What you need to understand is, what does it mean by testing a fire alarm system, and what does it mean by inspecting a fire alarm system? And once you separate the two in the mind, you'll be able to understand the questions that they're asking you. Which direction are they trying to point you to for you to actually find these answers? They definitely focus on signal type, alarm, supervisory, trouble, monitor, who could actually test the system, who's qualified to test the system. This is all what NICET is going to ask you on the Level 1 exam. So you need to be familiar with all of these particular categories and understand which direction are they sending me for you to actually answer that question correctly. All right, so I hope you understand what the difference between testing and inspecting. We know that inspecting a fire alarm system is a visual thing. I'm looking to make sure everything is set right. And testing, I'm actually seeing if the fire alarm system is actually functioning in the way it's supposed to be function, or the way it was designed, all right? So if you want to get further knowledge on your fire alarm, all the resources in the description. I'm the fire alarm expert, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.